I've used the word power struggle in the title. It might be a bit clickbaity, but I think there's something going on. When I look at the players we're linked with, and today the latest story is that Tim Steidtn is trying to sort of flex his muscles and show some influence in the signings, and has highlighted Ian Maatsen and Youssouf Fofana. And the suggestion is that these are not David Moyes' picks. Now, this is a well-trodden debate at West Ham. And there have been many, many players who we didn't know who picked whom. It actually precedes David Moyes. It really does. You remember, it's a Diop Pellegrini signing. There were suggestions that the Sullivan lads, Jack and David Jr., recommended that player. I don't know how much truth there was to any of that. Maybe lots, maybe none. But it's been going on for quite some time, and I think there's certainly been talk that Said Benrahma was a David Sullivan pick and not David Moyes'. You get to something a little bit more of a grey area, which would be Nikola Vlasic. Who chose Nikola Vlasic? It'd be easy to say it was David Moyes that signed him, but David Moyes had no inclination to play him whatsoever. So that's quite interesting. I still look at that now and think, who signed off on that deal? And why would you sign off on a deal when you know the manager's not going to play them? But I also think there's a duty of the manager to actually, try players out. Even if you didn't sign them, then try them out. Then we've got this whole sort of suggestion that it's now written into David Moyes' contract since he signed his most recent deal, the one that has 12 months left to run, that he has it in his contract. Contractually, he has to select the players. He has final say. Now, that would make things very interesting with the Tim Steidtn situation. So there's a lot to unpack there, and nobody really can know the truth. However, when I start looking at the list of targets, I think they seem to fall into three categories, and it really only sort of hit me today with this Ian Maatsen and Youssouf Fofana stuff, because they fall into almost the Tim Steidtn category, if you want. If you look at why this guy has been brought in and what he's mandated to do at West Ham, they would fit that. My three categories are what David Moyes' picks, Tim Steidtn's picks, and then ones that are in the middle which are palatable for both. Let's just go with what Steidtn's mandated to do. Without boring you to death about the financial fair play, we want to make sure that we're making more money on players than we're losing. We get a decent income, we have a decent turnover each season. It varies depending if we're in Europe or not. It's about 200 million. We want to increase that turnover because we want to have decent saleable assets. We don't want to be in a situation where, if you look at the most recent stories, we're selling Aaron Cresswell at the bang end of his career for £2.5 million. That's not really what West Ham want to be doing. So Tim Steidtn has got a track record, not just of bringing through youngsters, particularly at Leverkusen, but increasing the value of the squad, the net value of the squad, without spending loads of money. Basically, he unearths players who are good players, but go on to be worth considerably more. That's what he's mandated to do. I don't think anybody can question that. The questions come in when it's being suggested, why isn't he being allowed to do his job? Now, as ever, possibly the truth is somewhere in the middle. We hear early on that he's got authority to do what he wants. Then stories start to break out. Actually, he can't do anything. David Moyes decides on everything. The truth may well be somewhere in the middle, but that would require compromise. And that's something I struggle to get my head around. Not me compromising, but two people who are vastly opposed coming together and getting on and compromising. I think that's a difficult thing and difficult scenario for me to imagine. And so much of this stuff is filled with conspiracy. And one of the big conspiracies that I often hear is that Steidten himself was not even a Sullivan pick. So Steidten has been put in place by the person that will eventually buy West Ham. So the club know who's going to buy them, and this is not necessarily Daniel Kretinsky. West Ham know who's going to buy them. It's being held up at the moment because David Gold's shares are in probate, and you can't buy a club at the moment anyway. Once that's resolved, then the new person comes in and takes over the club. The suggestion is, this is all a theory, that person, before they take over the club, they want to ensure that when they take over, that there's a smooth running, that there is a development plan in place, that there's an infrastructure with his own people. So Steidten was parachuted in. That's one of the theories. One of the other theories is that that David Sullivan has put him in place with a view to David Moyes only having a year left. I don't know. None of us can know, by the way. And the reason none of us can know, well, do you know what? We can know, but we can't tell. And particularly with the former one, which is if we somehow know that there's this consortium who's going to take over West Ham and they have put Steidten in, we can't know and we can't tell, because there'll be a massive non-disclosure agreements. There'll be a load of NDAs, so you won't actually be able to say that stuff. So it is pretty much guesswork. So let's just run with that for a second. Let's just run with Steidten has been parachuted in by the next owner of the football club. Does that mean he's not impotent? Does that mean he's completely impotent? I don't think so. Because I think if I try and put myself in that situation and I was Tim Steidtn, I'd be phoning up whoever it might be, whoever the next owner is, and I'd be saying, they won't let me do anything. You've put me in place here to bring players in, to make the club healthy for when you take over in a year's time or whatever it might be. And I just can't do this. They won't let me work. They won't let me sign a player. So I think at that point, this is if you believe that particular conspiracy theory. At that point, whoever's going to take over the club, who's possibly going to do so for 700 million, whatever, is probably phoning David Sullivan and saying, oi, this wasn't the agreement. Let my man have some authority. Let him bring in some players. I don't want to take over this club full of journeymen. Now, I don't know. Again, I don't know how much truth there is in that, but that almost seems more realistic than the other one, which is Sullivan hires someone and then basically puts him on deep freeze for a year. That I find odd, because it's not like financial fair play is going to wait for a year. And surely if you believe in someone enough to hire them, you've got to give them the tools to do the job. And I do wonder what's going on now with these lists. And I do perhaps wonder if David Moyes' inability to make signings and get the players he wants over the line may have forced a situation where actually Steidten has come back into play. So we chase Harry Maguire would be a great example. Harry Maguire then comes out and says, number one, he doesn't want to drop from 180 grand a week. Well, we're not going to play him that. Number two, he wants to stay at Man U and fight for his place. He doesn't. We all know that. He's just saying this stuff so as he can get a payoff from Man United. So as basically Man United have to pay him his loyalty bonus and then he can leave. Anyway, whatever it is, it's a mess. It's clear West Ham can't sign him at the moment and can't pursue him, and nor should we. We should have learnt our lessons. We should have. This has happened twice before. We followed Jesse Lingard for far too long, and the other one, which probably goes under the radar a little bit, we were given a price for Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and we thought we'd wait and just see and wait for him to be out the team for a long period of time, and then we'd go back in and get him on the cheap. We'd wait. Well, that didn't happen because he ended up getting into the team because of injury, and then his value went up. So there's no point us playing this waiting game. And you've got a player like Harry Maguire that's very much a David Moyes pick. João Palhinha, very much a David Moyes pick. Experienced player. He's seen him in the Premier League. These are not players that Tim Steidtn would want to pick. And ideally, they are not part of the Tim Steidtn model, which is getting a relative unknown. And when I say relative unknown, I mean by and large to everybody. Not somebody that's is going to command 100 grand a week. Is going to be 50, 60 million. I'm not talking about relative unknown. I'm talking about the people that might be known, the people that play Football Manager, for instance, or something like that. But someone that's going to hit the ground running and then play and become worth more money. And I wonder if we're seeing that. The middle of the road players that I'm talking about, which are, I think Conor Gallagher, Alex Scott, people like that, I think they're palatable for both. I think possibly. And I might be wrong, this is all guesswork. So I think David Moyes think, I'll have him. So Conor Gallagher ticks his box because he's seen him play. He's played against him, scored a brace against us for Crystal Palace. And I think he possibly almost ticks Steidten's box in as much as he's a young player. He's probably going to get better. And even if he doesn't work out, you could probably, as a 23-year-old, you could probably sell him as a 25-year-old for the same amount you've got him. I think it's a safe transfer. But it is going to require some sort of compromise. And I think my main worry on all this is that this compromise is it's time consuming. It's going to take us a long time to get round all of this. And I do wonder if there's a situation here, and this I mean it's all wondering, we can't possibly know. That's why it makes us think, it drives you around a twist. Is there a situation where David Moyes say, okay, David, you go and get your players, go and get Harry Maguire, go and get João Palhinha. Okay, well you can't get Maguire. João Palhinha, 80 million, we're not paying 80 million for him. Right, okay, we've tried your players, now we're going to get Tim Steidtn, he's going to have a go. I know they're players in different positions. I am actually just, comparing, a central midfielder and a centre-back with a central midfielder in Fofana and a full-back in Maatsen. But I don't know. I do wonder if that's the case. I hope these are true because I'd much rather, and Gio's going to be along later to discuss one of these players in particular, but I'd much rather us invest in these type of players. I don't have full trust in David Moyes for bringing players in. Some of them work out, some of them do. But some of them are mitigating disasters, like Vlasic. And there's no point me going through all of them. And I sometimes wonder, David Moyes is not great at taking these recommended players. He himself admitted Julian Alvarez was recommended to him. We don't know who. He said, nah, don't fancy it. Not from his own mouth, but it came from the same original source that Casieda was recommended to him. I thought, oh no, I don't want to. I think his judgment on those sort of players, I think he's cautious. I think that's a hindrance to him. So it's very, very interesting what's going on at the moment. Power struggle is probably too strong a word for it, but there's certainly going to be a flex in the muscles here and some manoeuvrings to, not to see who's in control of the club, because I think that goes too far. It is just about signing players. And I've always thought it would be fair for this last season to if David Moyes has got a key signing, that one signing he wants, let him have it. But if we're going to go and sign 3 others, then let Steidten do it. The only thing I'd veto signings on David Moyes. I'd say, okay, we'll get you the guy you want on loan. We can do that. We'll also get you the guy you want if he's under 26. What I'd be reluctant to do is give David Moyes 50 million for, a 28, 29-year-old. I think that would just be silly. So even if we do that and we give him to one player and then Tim Steidtn can buy 2 or 3, and I still haven't made up my mind whether Steidtn is allowed to buy players or he's impotent, but the narrative seems to be changing. It changes all the time. What is vitally important is that if Tim Steidtn is allowed to do this and these rumours today are true about Fofana and Maatsen, if Steidtn is mandated to bring them in and he brings them in, we've got a major problem on our hands if David Moyes doesn't play him.